Hello, welcome to this episode of Martial Truth Podcast, my interview with Hermann Bayer. Hermann Bayer is the author of Analysis of Shorin Ryu in Karatedo, When a Fighting Art Becomes a Fine Art, as well as a couple of other books, which I'll have listed in the description, and there'll be links in the description to purchase the book. Excellent book. Enjoyed it much more than I thought I would. I highly recommend it. It makes you really think about a lot of things we're doing and how the Shorin Ryu principle applies to modern karatedo and, frankly, a lot of other things in life. So, very good book. Excellent. Mr. Bayer comes from many, many different angles. Really got me to thinking about a lot of things. So I really enjoyed the book. I highly recommend. So I hope you'll enjoy the interview and the conversation we have, because I know I enjoyed talking to him a lot. As always, please click that like, share, subscribe button. Consider becoming a monthly member. I can't do it without the people that continue to follow the podcast. We know the Tom Lewis interview went very well. A lot of people seem to have liked that. We're going to look into possibly interviewing some more people along those lines, and just keep going forward with everything we're doing. All right. So please, again, like, share, subscribe. And here's my interview with Hermann Bayer. So Hermann Bayer, welcome to the Martial Truth Podcast. Hermann Bayer is the author of several books, including a book he was nice enough to send to me on Shorin Ryu, a book which, frankly, you say to yourself, well, it's only about one concept in martial arts. I liked it way more than I thought I would. I really enjoyed reading the book. You come at it from so many different angles that there's literally nothing left uncovered. So why don't you tell the audience exactly what Shorin Ryu is, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thank you for having me on. And I came across this concept actually a couple of years ago when I started to dive into the martial arts, especially into karate and the developments into different forms. And especially during the years of COVID, where we basically left alone without any further contact to our sensei, I started to reread and look into all kind of concepts which interested me, especially with the notion of distinguishing between martial arts or karate-do approaches in terms of self-improvement versus self-defense approaches. So, and I realized that Shorin Ryu. Oh, first let me tell you, answer your question. What is it? It is a combination of three Japanese kanji. Shu stands for preserve, maintain. Ha stands for break, overcome, if you want, and Ri means transcend. So it basically is, all right. So to wrap it up again, to summarize, Shu is preserve, copy, stick to the form. Ha is overcome the form, break away, break the mold, kind of. And Re means transcend the whole thing, be creative, develop something new. So it is basically a concept about developing skills. Okay. Well, there are several other concepts in the West, in Asia, but nevertheless, what kind of baffled me was that I found this only mentioned in the mid-80s, but not before that. So my interest rose, of course, thinking, is that, well, the first one really mentioning it was Patrick McCarthy in his book about the kata of Okinawa. And it's just a paragraph in there. And I was wondering, is that something what was rediscovered, or was it suddenly created in those years? Because we have many other examples in karate, especially, which they call in scientific research, they call it invented tradition. So there are some concepts which are basically new, but they are sold to us as being traditional concepts, which is not a bad thing, and no harm is done actually. And in this case, Shuhari, you can practice karate and develop your skills without even knowing about it, right?
Right.
It's just a description of steps you take to get more, to become more competent. So now. I contacted colleagues and friends and karate practitioners and sensei, and I figured out no, not everybody knew about that. Some did not, uh, and some said the one I'm in contact with who developed out of the traditional Okinawan karate circles, which are very adamant to keep their art pure, if they will, and not combine it or mix it up with Japanese interpretation, mainland Japanese interpretations of the art. Uh, and they said, this is not an Okinawan concept at all, it's a Japanese concept. So, okay, the road, what to do and where to look at became clear to me from there on.
Yeah, it's interesting because in reading the book when you mentioned that, I immediately thought the same thing. I immediately thought, well, I'm doing Okinawan karate since 1979. And
I
it's not
know.
it's not a concept that I'd heard in Okinawan karate. And I'm also someone well versed in the Japanese Koryu traditions. I studied Shindo Musaru extensively, Musa Shindenru, Yagyu Shinkagiru, Katori Shinto-ru, Sosui Shitsuru Jitsu. So I've studied several Koryu arts. And even there, I have to say, it's not a concept where I've heard it mentioned. I was aware of the concept, but on the peripheral, not as something that was really at the forefront of my training that any of my teachers actually um, put forward. The concept, though, is something where I could see where it's a pure Japanese concept. And the way you put it through within the business world and everything else. Briefly, I studied bonsai, Japanese, trees, and I could see how the concept would 100% apply to that also. So it's interesting, but I think as a concept, I think it's actually a very good concept for karate people to be aware of. I think you can learn a lot from it, and I think if you take a look at it from many different kind of angles, um, you see a lot. And one of the things that you did, which I really liked, was the fact that you talked about the final stage, where it's almost like breaking away. But it doesn't mean you break away from your teacher, right? It means you're discovering new things on your own. You're elevating the art that up to this point you've been teaching, but hopefully now you've discovered your own things, and you're able to kind of, in a simple way of looking at it, put your own spin on it. So you're not necessarily changing anything. You're not leaving your teacher, but now, and one of the things I say, like people have said to me, because I studied all these arts, well, why don't you start your own style? All right. I
Mhm,
get asked that
mhm.
question every
Yeah,
once in a while.
there you go. That's exactly the Western approach, and that
Right.
is the misconception.
Right. Right. So my
Yeah.
my answer is always, well, why do I have to start my own style? I'm teaching my version of the arts I studied. So, of course, I'm slightly different from my Okinawan sensei. I'm slightly different from my Japanese sensei because I'm me. I'm not them. I'm not looking, again, I'm past the mimicking stage as we talk about in the shoe stage, right? But why should I have to start my own style? Like it's almost like I just don't understand it. I had one teacher who said, if you get promoted to Menkyo, if you get recognized as a Menkyo, which is a very senior Japanese grade, right? Oh,
Right.
that's your license to start your own style. And I kind of looked at him and said to myself, well, I've never read where that's a license to start your own style. It's just another grade. But you're right. Amongst the Westerners, it's almost like they're looking for an excuse to start doing their own thing. Completely separate. I'm going to start my own thing. And, thanks for everything you did for me. But now I'm just going to do my own thing and move on. And I just don't understand that in terms of the Western psyche, you know.
If I may, I I use the example of a language. And I say, if you do karate or even a karate style, the good old, like let's say Shorin Ryu, what you practice, it's like a language.
Right.
And if you develop in the language, say you are a poet, right?
Right.
And you write your poems, you write your essays, you write your novels, you don't need to invent a new grammar to do that. You use that art, you use that tool and develop into something new and beautiful. But you are still within your tradition, you are within your language. Now, here's the second thought. You can use different languages to express the same thing, right? There's English, there's French, there's German, there's Chinese, I don't know what. And uh, every language it gives you the ability to say the same thing. That is, in my point of view, the same situation in the martial arts or in the karate to overcome this endless and, in my humble opinion, stupid discussions about uh, my style is better than your style and it's more dangerous and it's more lethal and that doesn't work. Every karate style has everything you need to survive in a fight because it's a psychological thing. You are a police officer, a retired police officer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, back to what you said. Uh, 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 there are values in our Western world, especially in the US. We are raised with keeping the eyes on the goal, doing something special, competition all over. There's nothing without competition, and you want to win, which is a good thing. It brings a nation forward and achieves a lot. But that that creates a specific mindset which is exactly what you articulated, that I have to do something on my own. And now you combine that with what karate became in the last 2, 3 decades, a business. I have to find a market niche. So I create something which is different from others and have a secluded market. That completely contradicts the tradition where sensei sent their students to other sensei to learn from them. Yeah, like apprenticeships.
Well,
And
it's interesting you say that, right? Because I was in Okinawa in December,
okay,
and I've been to Okinawa several times in the last few years, and I have had discussions with some senior Okinawan sensei. Um, so like Okinawa, I think right now has got a bit of a problem, and the problem is karate. It's totally become about the tournament. And a senior Okinawan sensei who passed away last year, Yogi Yosei, said to me
yeah,
that karate had painted itself into a corner, and that corner was the tournament. And he said, now in Okinawa, if your students don't do well in a tournament, well, you're not viewed upon as having good karate. And he explained to me that when he started karate, and at the time he was in his 80s, he said to me, we were told when you reached for the door handle to leave your house, you had to be ready, right? And he said, so the emphasis has changed. And I had a discussion with them where they were complaining to me, and I just saw an interview with Ashiki Sensei from Mariyoshi Kobudo, where he was complaining that they don't have young people doing karate. And
Mhm.
they were complaining to me that they would lose the young people at around middle school, which is like 11, 12 years old. So I
Yeah.
literally looked at them and I said, "Well, can I tell you why you're losing them?" And they said, "Sure." I said, "Well, because that's when they start playing other sports. They start playing soccer, they start playing basketball, they start playing baseball. And let's be honest, as a sport, karate is boring. A kid goes to a tournament, he goes out, he does one tournament, one kata for 30 seconds. That's it. He goes out, maybe fights in a couple of kumite matches, a total of 5 minutes. That's it. But he's there all day. You know, again, he goes out and runs up and down a soccer field for 2 hours. He runs up and down a basketball court for 2 hours. He's playing baseball, running around. Those are fun sports. And they kind of looked at me and I said, the problem is you took away karate being special, which is it's a way of life and a life protection art. So like in my dojo with my kids' classes, I keep them very fun. I don't expect the kids to get high, like crazy fighting ability. I want them to stick around until I can move them into my adult classes at the age of 12. And then I start showing them real martial art. And, when you talk
Mhm.
about it from a business sense, I had to change. I had a traditional school storefront in New York City. We just celebrated in New York the dojo being open 40 years. Okay.
Oh,
And yeah, thank
congratulations.
you. So my students still running it there. I have nothing to do with it, other than I go back to do seminars. But the thing
Mhm.
I learned is I had to change the way I was doing things. So I couldn't make the kids' classes so serious. I made them a lot more fun. But on the other hand, my adult classes were very serious about real self-defense, no sport aspect. I didn't do any type of sport sparring in my dojo for more than 30 years now. Everything was real types of attacks. And again, of course, the thing you talk about in the book is how each one of these concepts can overlap the other, and which I don't think is a bad thing, especially the jitsu and the do aspect. I think if it's only about fighting, I think that can create problems. I think it has to be also about the do aspect where you're training and teaching people why you fight, when you fight, not just that it's all about the violence, which is something I see a lot in the MMA world. It's all about winning the fight, instead of it being about let's develop ourselves, right? And if we have to fight, we have the skill to defeat the opponent that's trying to harm us. But it's not just about the fight. So that was to me something you pointed out really, really well in the book. Um, so I just think these are important things that I think, sometimes I think people go too much in one direction, too much in the other direction, instead of realizing that, it can be a combination of things. And I saw a lot of
Absolutely.
my traditional
Absolutely.
friends that had dojos had to close their schools because they weren't willing to change it all. And I tried to tell them, no, you guys have to stop doing this. You have to change. You got to be a little bit more open to change. And they just weren't and closed their doors. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, for the to your first thought of a combination of both aspects, Do and Jitsu, uh, the good old yin yang symbol.
right.
Uh, Two contrasting approaches create a unity. And you have this spot, you have the white spot in the black area of the
Right.
symbol, and you have the black spot in the white area. There's always some Jitsu in Do, and there's always some Do in Jitsu, but nevertheless, both together uh, create this unity. Exactly my thought as well. And uh, uh, the fun part, or teaching children and so on, in my book, I use the example to say if an organization doesn't adjust to changing environments, the organization vanishes, right? So that's an old principle out of the business world.
Yep.
You have to adapt or you're gone.
Right.
And the same thing is happening with the many traditional dojos. If they don't adapt because society changed over the last 30 years, and it didn't change a little bit, it changed a lot. So new values come, the fun-seeking generation and so on. Uh, I don't want to go into that. Everybody knows what we are talking about
Right.
here. But you have to adapt your teaching. So I suggested in the book as well, because at the end, shuhari is a pedagogic concept, right? You develop somebody, uh, copy the kata in detail, then apply the movements, and now your bodily constitution, your height, your weight, your the ability to move and so on come into play. Your individuality comes into play, and then you create your own set of application that helps you in a specific situation. So that is shuhari. And when you are in the re phase, now here's the difference to the Western thinking. In the West, you build up skills to mastery, and then you are basically done. In the Japanese shuhari concept is you start over in shu, because your master level changes your perspective, changes your ability, and suddenly you do naihanshi kata again, and you develop other hip movements, just to
Right.
to
Right.
use an example.
Well,
Uh,
it's
but yeah, go.
I was going to say it's interesting you say that because one of the things I learned with myself early on is every time an Ishinru, I'll use Ishinru as an example. I'll give you two examples, one from Ishinru, one from Chen style Taiji Chuan. In Ishinru, every time I got promoted to another level of black belt, what I did was I went back to the first basic
Mhm. Same here.
and I started looking at everything again. And, and I just, by the time I kind of went through everything, it wasn't probably a long time before I got promoted again. So then I would go back and do it again. And in Chen style Taiji Chuan practical method, my Taiji master, Chen Jianghua, he often says, okay, you've got to mimic me for 5 years. For 5 years, you mimic my movements. But after that, you have to start examining each movement based on your body. And you have to try to take the principles I'm teaching you, and you have to start to now figure that out. And then eventually, you begin to do it for your body. So like one of the things I say all the time is like if you see my Tai Chi master do the form with power and you see me do the form with power, the moves are the same, but the way we use our bodies are a little different because I'm not him. And then the other thing that we discussed, and this comes back to your what you just talked about, that you get to a certain level of, lack of a better term, mastery, right?
Mhm.
And like me, I discussed this with him where, I never realized this until you get to this point. And I think you have to get to this point to realize it, which is like an Ishinru now. I, I'm not so much interested in, I teach techniques to the students, but for myself, I almost feel like I've become the technique. What I mean by that is I don't have to think about anything. And to be honest, when I'm working with a partner, I always feel like I'm almost dumbing it down because I just want to do certain things, but obviously I can't because the opponent, my student, would get hurt, right? So I have to kind of dial it down, but
Mhm.
there's no longer a thought process there with, oh, I'll do this technique in this situation, or I'll do that technique in this. No, you become the technique. And I think what people don't realize, especially like we're talking about a 20-year-old who decides to leave and start his own style, who has this self-inflated, overinflated opinion of himself, he has no idea of really what's going on because he just doesn't have enough time in. And I think that's one of the things younger people don't realize. And I think them leaving the master too early, I think really hurts their development and they
Yeah.
never get to where they should be. And even in Ishinru karate, I'll use it an example with the first Americans that studied with Tatsuo Sensei in Okinawa. They only studied 8 to 13 months. And I understand why he gave them high rank and sent them back. He wanted to spread the art. But let's face it, in 13 months or 18 months, how much karate could they have learned? The answer is not that much, and virtually none of them went back. So again, I think a lot of people in Ishinru base Ishinru on what those guys learned. I don't think that's the good way to look at it, because I'll just give you an example. We attended the Ishinru World Karate Association, which is my teachers association, the Kichido Shimabuku. Every 2 years we have a tournament. And in one year we go, and Master Shimabuku teaches a seminar, and he
Hmm.
decided to do self-defense. So my teacher's doing joint locking techniques and all these different things, and my students are
Hmm.
doing them no problem. But a lot of the other students there are literally looking
Can't
at
do
my
it.
students going,
Yeah,
what are these techniques? Like, where did these come from? And my
yeah,
students are like, what are you talking about? We do this all the time in our dojo. Oh, we never do
yeah,
this in our dojo. Again,
yeah,
going back to those early guys, we thank them for bringing the art back and spreading the art, but we made the mistake of thinking they brought back the complete art when they weren't
yeah,
there long enough and weren't attached to the master long enough to really bring
yeah,
back a complete art. And it's not just in
yeah,
Ishinru, it's in many of the other, the early Westerners that came back from Okinawa. They brought back an
right,
incomplete art.
yeah. So and that's what you find in most cases. It's watered down, a watered down version of the initial, let's say, style. I interestingly enough, last weekend I took I trained with Tadashi Yamashita
Okay.
again after many years. And for me that's just another example. I mean, I'm 77 years old. I could hold my ground. He's 84, but
Right.
he moves like a 30-year-old,
Right.
flashing lightning fast, unbelievable. And he comes from the same tradition I'm training in, Shorin Ryu, Nakasato Sensei, and my sensei is Noel Smith, one of the initial original seven uh, uh, Shorin Ryu students sent to America to spread the art. And Tadashi Sensei, he sharpens these Shorin Ryu moves into something that he, by the way, only teaches to black belts, and color belts and kids and teens are not even allowed to watch that section of the training. But it is something, I can tell you that. Um, uh, sorry, you know that, of course, but it is actually very damaging, to say the least,
Right.
in a very speedy fashion. It's the art itself. It's There is no more ego, there is no more individualism. There is simply trying to survive a situation. And yeah,
What I was going to say
it's
was,
really what you said, confirming what you're
yeah, I,
saying.
I often say that, I've been in a lot of empty hand combat. Uh, Nobody ever asked me what rank I was. No one ever asked me how many certificates I had. Um, you know, it was the only concern I had was making sure I won and I went home to my family that night, and that was it. And this discussion came up on Okinawa where I said, the Okinawans have lost their edge a little bit. They're not, and so someone's response to me, and I totally get it. Well, Okinawa is very safe. So my response to them was, well, do Okinawans ever travel? And they kind of looked at me and I said, because not every place in the world is safe. I mean, look, I've been to London numerous times. All right. Certain parts of London are dangerous. Certain parts of any place in the world are dangerous. Okay. Um, so this idea, like one of the things I raised in Okinawa was, well, if karate is no longer about self-defense, is it karate? That's the question I asked. So is it the art that we claim it is? And one of the things I find interesting is I think there's more people in the West now taking it more serious as a self-defense art than there
Yeah,
are in
yeah,
Okinawa or in Japan. And
yeah.
Japan, the one thing I'll say, like Japanese karate, um, is not Okinawan karate by any stretch. Um, and
I
again, the
agree.
funny thing was is when I was training in the Koru, the Koru people when they heard I did karate, They didn't call it Okinawan karate. They said, "Oh, Michael, you do Koru karate." So
Mhm.
they would call the Okinawan karate Koru karate. In other words, saying the Okinawan karate is like our Koru arts. It's for fighting, whereas the Japanese karate is totally sport based. You know,
Mhm.
and it's really gone totally in that direction, right? And again, there's
It's an
nothing.
it's yeah.
No, go ahead.
It's dancing basically, an
Yeah,
athletic dance,
yeah.
which is not a bad thing,
No,
of course.
I
So
have
that
no trouble with it,
I
right?
think we have to highlight that there are different versions of the art. Every version has its purpose and its value,
Right,
and people are free to choose. What do I want to? There are
right,
people out there that simply don't want to fight,
right,
and so the do is the perfect way. There are
right,
people who want competition, so sports karate is the perfect way. Of
right.
course, I want to do the traditional thing. You
Yeah.
do the same.
Right. I
Yeah.
have, the New York school is very more interested in self-defense. So the New York school would be the
Mm.
jitsu and the do. But I have a student
Yeah.
in London who's very into sport karate.
Okay.
So for him,
Yeah.
it's different. Now, again, what do I tell him? I say, well, you could do whatever you want. If it makes you happy, do it. I mean, that's one of the things I try to say all the time. And I'm not saying you have to do karate like me. And I'm what one of the things that though I have a problem with is the sport karate people that think somehow what they're working on in the dojo is going to automatically translate into actual combat, that they're actually going to be able to use that in a fight.
That's dangerous. That is actually dangerous.
Right.
It creates the wrong mindset. I
Right.
mean, kumite, our listeners know that you see the punch coming and uh, you practice to defend in a specific way. That's not how it happens, but it creates the mindset that you are competent and can stand your ground in a fight. You cannot.
Right.
With regard to your thought earlier, I mean, I can tell you without bragging, I can tell you within minutes whether a sensei ever fought in his or her life. Within minutes, you can see that. And there are actually very few who fought, who have the experience either in the military or in the police force or in the security field or in some related professions or in personal life experience, uh, who deal with it, and they tell you different applications and different mindsets. So the student had I suggested in the earlier books I wrote already the terms you use jutsu, do, and sports karate. The one of the confusions is created because we use the same term for different things.
Right.
Yeah. In judo, you have jujitsu, the martial way, and you have judo, the sport application. In karate, we use the same term for different things.
Right.
And so people confuse it and they think karate is simply karate, which is not. And our job as sensei or promoters of the art is to make that clear. And the students are free to choose whatever they want, as you say, that's
Right.
right, but they have to know the different
Right.
versions and the purpose of the different versions. And and then they can choose, and then they know the limitations of what they're doing, and don't stumble with under false pretenses and false sense of security into a street fight.
I
Yeah,
when I the person I trained with initially in Nisshin Karate, I mean he was a tough guy. He'd been in fights, but he'd been in, bar fights. That kind
yeah,
of stuff. All
yeah.
right.
It's good
Right.
enough. I'm
Right.
sorry.
Yeah. But
For experience, good
but
enough.
like I explained to people, there's a difference between that kind of fight and when you're a law enforcement officer, and someone tries to fight you and the possibility exists that he takes your gun and kills you. It's a
Yeah,
different it's different. It's different mentally, it's different physically. The criminal that decides to attack a guy that's armed with a gun and a nightstick and other weapons, um, it's gonna be a little bit different. And what I discovered initially is the way I was taught some of the techniques didn't work in combat. Like when I went to
Mhm.
do them, they didn't work. And then what I did was, for myself, instead of blaming the technique, I said to myself, no, no, it can't be this technique because this technique is found in every martial art. So it has to be the way I'm doing it. So then what I did was I really took a deep dive in that technique, trying to figure out the optimum way to do it. And then as time went on in my career, when I would use that technique, it would work much better. So that's one of the things I understood too. And, like I tell people when I teach seminars and stuff that my karate, my fighting experience changed my karate dramatically. Like,
Mhm.
how could it not change my martial arts? Like, some people sometimes, like I'll use Tai Chi as an example. I'll do push hands with someone in Tai Chi that's not used to pushing with me or training with me. And they'll say to me that I give off a vibe of danger. Like they get nervous when they push hands with me. But my students who are used to me, they laugh when they hear that. They're like, "Well, we push with them all the time, whether it be my female students or my. It makes no difference." They're like, "Why do you feel nervous when you're pushing them?" Well, there's just a vibe of like. And I try to explain to them, well, when you've been through what I've been through, you have to understand it changes you. So my martial arts has a certain intensity to it, and that can't be helped.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
anybody that's been in those situations, whether it was the military, security services, anything, I think you become a little more intense because I think you understand what's really on the line and how dangerous it is. And I think a lot of karate sensei, like you said, I don't think they really have a clue. I think they really, unless they've experienced real violence,
Mhm.
I really don't think they get it. And again, I'm not knocking those guys. What I don't like is if I go to a seminar and someone says, "Oh, this technique works all the time." And then
Mhm.
I want to raise my hand and go, "Well, excuse me, how many times have you used that technique in combat?"
Mhm.
And again, if the answer is zero, well, how do you know this technique works all the time? Right? And there's no such thing as a technique that works all the time. But we hear certain
Mhm.
martial arts instructors say these types of things. Like I had a judo teacher years ago say, um, well, the best thing is throwing someone on their head, right? And okay, yeah, that's great, but it's very difficult to throw someone in combat. Okay, um, you know,
Mhm.
I'm just saying, and so again, they make these statements without
Mhm.
any experience to back
Mhm.
them up. That's the thing that
Yeah.
kind of bothers me. That I wish, and look again, all I'm saying is if you haven't experienced violence, well, then go train or pick up a phone and talk to someone that has experienced a lot of violence and let them educate you on what it's like. Like I say all the time,
Pressure test your technique with
yeah,
someone who has this experience. Exactly.
right.
That's what I say. Yeah.
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 Recently there's been some discussion. I get a lot of comments on posts where I'm teaching knife defense or gun disarms, where someone will
Mhm.
write, you shouldn't teach that stuff. Oh, it doesn't work. It's too dangerous.
Mhm.
But then I go and I pull up videos on YouTube and X and everywhere else, and you see videos of people disarming people that have guns. You see people disarming people that have knives. And again, if I'm teaching self-defense, of course, it's going to be very difficult to face someone armed with a weapon. But my job is to prepare my students. I have to give them something that they could possibly use. And I've consulted trained knife fighters, and they're 100% in agreement that, well, what are we supposed to do, Mike? We know it's going to be difficult facing someone with a blade or a weapon. We have to prepare the students somehow. We have to train them with certain techniques. We have to give them something in the toolbox that at least gives them a chance. And to just put your head in the sand and say, well, I'm not going to teach that because it's too dangerous and the student will get hurt. Like to me, it makes no sense in
Mhm.
terms of the thought process there.
Mhm. Uh, that is, of course, a topic that will split the listeners very much so. So uh, the good thing is, Mike, that you are an experienced police officer. You know exactly what you're talking about. Uh, so I'm not.
Right.
Uh, I I faced a violent situation. I've witnessed a couple of violent situation. I survived violent situation, um, and I did the right thing apparently. But I don't go in my teaching. I'm at my age. I'm teaching seniors now.
Right.
Okay, so I have to leave that uh, to guys like yourself to teach real self-defense. I teach seniors who are more interesting to uh, develop themselves, not to fall down.
Right.
And of course, to break grips is important here. If somebody grabs your wrist,
Right.
somebody grabs your throat, and we do that in terms of self-defense. But I cannot teach them uh, uh, how to survive a knife fight. But I agree with what you say, without any uh, without any reservation. If the situation comes, then it is better you have the chance to do something to gain these precious 5 seconds you need to get away, or to do some damage. And you prepare your students mentally, I suppose, because that's what we have to do. You will be cut.
Right.
So you have to
Right.
you have to be ready. Well, the old samurai said you have to be ready to die when you enter the fight, and that actually calms you down, and that is the skill level of meditation and all
Right.
these kind of things, to accept the to accept death, basically. Now, should we teach that? It's up to the students. If
Right.
he wants to know about it, we can do that. But otherwise, it's a little bit reserved to ourselves, right?
Right. So
Yeah,
it's interesting you said about the people you're teaching. So you're teaching seniors, right? But see, my argument would be is in teaching them to have good balance and teaching them to be physically fit and teaching them to be able to move and maintain their health. That's also self-defense because they're fighting age, right? Which we're all fighting, right? And one of the things I say all the time is with martial arts to me is a two-sided coin. On the one side is self-defense, on the other side is health.
absolutely. And that actually is the original Okinawan interpretation of karate.
Right.
It is uh, defending against damage of all kinds, not just physical damage.
Right.
Uh, Health is coming into so and therefore in Okinawan philosophy, which is different than the Do philosophy of Japan, uh, you get fit, to put it, from the inside out. So it starts with what kind of food you eat, what kind of drink you drink, what kind of thoughts you have, how you take care of yourself, and then the circle outward, your family, your community, and so on. And fighting off harm uh, covers all that. And that got lost in the transition and translation of traditional karate into Japanese karate. That was lost, and a new philosophy was created.
So the interesting thing, one of my students is a senior Shotokan karate sensei, and he's already had his hip replaced. And a lot of the senior Shotokan karate senseis have had hip and knee replacement. And one of the things I said to him is, I said, this is one of the bad things about the Japanese mindset, which is it has to be done like this. There can be no deviation. It can't change. Um, but you see a lot of the karate people in Japan getting hip and knee replacement. And I said to him one day, I said, when is someone going to raise their hand and say, hey, why are we all getting hip and knee replacement? Um, are we moving in a way that's causing the body harm? And, one of the things one of my Chinese masters said to me was, you should practice nothing that causes the body injury. If you're practicing
Mhm.
something and that something is injuring your body, like he said, why would you do that? And that's one of the interesting things that I see on the Japanese karate side. And even in some Chinese arts now, uh, we're seeing some certain things where people are getting knee replacement and hip replacement. We're like, well, then how could that art be good for your health, right? Um,
Mhm.
so it's just an interesting thing, and they're so locked in that they can't take a step back and say, "Hey, we need to fix something here. We need to, maybe bring in some movement professionals and say, well, that movement there is putting bad stress on your knee, and that movement there is actually injuring the hip." I had Bill Superfoot Wallace. Um,
Mhm.
he stopped in my dojo years ago and he studied on Okinawa. I don't, a lot of people don't realize that about him. He started originally on Okinawa. And I asked him, I said, so Sensei, you're one of the greatest kickers in the world, right? I said, is there anything you'd do different? And he said to me, I've had hip replacement, I've had knee replacement. He said, I wouldn't do a side kick above my waist. That's what he said. So here's the one of the greatest kickers in the world, right? Who could kick like, oh my God, we would all kill to be able to kick like that guy could, right? And here he's saying to me, if I knew what I knew then, I would not kick above the waist. So
Mhm.
again, right? Um, that's the thing I find interesting. I find as I'm getting older, like that kind of reverberated with me. So like when I do side kicks now, I don't do them high because again, I don't want to put that wear and tear on my body. And again, I tell people like in all the fights I've been in and stuff, you don't kick as nearly as much as you use your hands. I mean, and if you
Mhm.
look at the kata and you add up the amount of kicking techniques to the hand techniques, it's overwhelmingly hand techniques as opposed to kicking
Mhm.
techniques. You look at Motobu. Motobu says, be careful kicking in combat because, again, why? You're on one leg.
Mhm.
It creates a dangerous possibility, right? And I'm not saying
Yeah.
you don't kick. Of course you kick. If the opportunity's there, a kick is a very powerful technique and end a fight. But I will tell
And
you,
it's a kind of defense as well.
yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah.
And the thing is too is but again, I don't remember kicking above the waist.
No.
I wasn't doing any head kicks
We
with
don't
30
do that
pounds of gear on.
in our Kobayashi Shorin
Yeah.
Ryu. We don't do that.
Yeah.
This from here to here, it's hand. From here, waist downward, it's leg if needed. I want to circle back to what you said. In Japanese karate, they say you do it exactly like this. It's the form. The form is important. Now we are at Shu. Some say Japanese culture is a culture of forms, and there is no deviation. Now, in Okinawa, the first thing you learn is vasa, is application. So you said my technique didn't work, so I must have to done the technique not appropriately or whatever. That's exactly that thought. For uh, speaking of fighting, who knows what will come in a fight? Only your attacker knows. Only the attacker knows what he will do. And you have to deal whatever is thrown at you to defend, parry, block, counter, which is all one thing together. That is Vasa. Uh, Japanese call it bunkai, but Vasa is the better word for that. And this technique is appropriate, or the technique is appropriate to the situation the attacker uses. Now, after a couple of, I don't know, maybe 100 years, maybe 200 years, the Okinawans started to bring these vasa together in a textbook, kata.
Yes.
But now here's the thing, kata, is the textbook. I repeat myself,
Right.
and therefore is not changed in Okinawa.
Right.
In Japanese karate, kata includes applications. So in Japanese karate, the thought is that a specific action or attack has to be responded in a specific predetermined way. And uh, uh, depending on the individual karateka, they may change a little bit to make sure it works for them. So that's why you have these different kata interpretations in Japanese karate. In Okinawan karate, that is all waza. In waza, you use whatever, you use a kata move and modify it
Right.
for the situation, but the kata remains the same as
Right.
a teaching or as a practicing tool.
So my Kobudo sensei, Gakiya Yoshiaki, once said to me, I was practicing a move in a kata, and I did a particular move a certain way, and he told me, no, 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 Michael, no, no, like this. And I said to him, why do we do it like that? He said, well, because Matayoshi sensei showed it like that to me. And I said, okay.
Mhm.
And then he said something that I use all the time, which he said, put kata into the fight. Don't put fight into the kata. And what he meant by
Mhm.
that was don't change the kata move to make it look like the way you do it in the fight. And
Understand.
and in the
Yeah.
interesting thing is when I started studying Chen style Taiji Chuan, I've been an indoor disciple since 2003, so you know quite a long time now um,
Yeah.
of Chen Jianghua. And when he started showing me the fighting applications for the movements and the form, it wasn't one application; it was multiple applications, right? And then,
It's
then
a concept, not a move.
exactly. And now, but when we do the move form, we do the form. And what he explains is the form is to develop your physical ability. And one of the things he often says is form practice or single person practice is truly the only place where you can go full power. He said if we're working out together, Mike, and one of us decides to go full power, someone's going to get hurt. And he said, so we're always kind of holding back, except when we do forms. And the form is
Mhm.
designed to create perfect balance, devastating speed and power, all these things, right? But if we start changing the form and start adding fighting into it, the form kind of starts to suffer and your technique starts to suffer. And one of the things he said, and again, something I use all the time, there is no martial art in a fight. And what he means by that is you can't be worried about being in a certain stance or looking a certain way when someone's trying to
Mhm.
kill you. What matters is
Yeah.
that you win. So again, but when we're training in these arts, there is an artistic aspect to it, and there's a training way. But then when we fight, we have to just fight. We can't be, like I would get asked by other police officers, well, you do jujitsu, you do tai chi, you do karate. Like when you fight, what do you use? And I would look at them and go, I would just fight.
Whatever helps,
Yeah, I
right?
just fight. I'm not thinking, oh, today I'll use jujitsu, tomorrow I'll use tai chi. So it's interesting though, because when you see in Okinawa, you see in the last, I want to say, since probably the 60s or 70s, you see this a lot of partner drills where they're prearranged partner drills. And
Yeah.
we don't do that in Ishinru Karate. I mean, I see
Well,
Ishinru Sensei creating them now, but the founder didn't do any of that. The founder was Waza. It wasn't, so I don't do that because I don't think it prepares you for combat.
no, it does not.
Yeah.
No, that is actually uh, proven through research. It's not just we talking here. It's proven through research that it creates the wrong psychology for a real fight. Um, but nevertheless, it's done because it looks like it makes teaching easier and there is one Italian sensei who wrote one of the forewords in my book, he uses the term of crystallization. When the when the Japanese took over or developed their understanding of karate, they broke the art down into specific techniques, stances, and so on, and gave them a name. They crystallized the art that way because the fluidity was gone, and now the a fluid position of the legs to prepare the application of a hand technique, for example, becomes a stance with a specific name. It never was a stance. It was a position you go through into the next, into the next, into the next. But this crystallization is actually a European thought tradition created in sciences, where you know about the butterflies with the needle
Yeah.
pinned into
Uh-huh.
categories, groups, subgroups, like a hierarchy, and
Right.
named. So, and that that gave those researchers a couple of 100 years ago the impression to understand or basically to own what they are researching, so you to get the grip on it. And Japanese loved that idea during the time when they opened up to the West, which was in the 1920s, a little bit earlier, Meiji period. And they applied this. There's a publication actually written by the Emperor of Japan, how this uh, toxology is the word for it. Uh, how this way to categorize and to group single events in a specific logic, how that is used in and should be used in science. And they did that to karate. You know, interestingly enough, it was an Okinawan who started that, Funakoshi Shotokan. He gave names to moves and stances who didn't have names before, or who had simply the phonetic expression of a Chinese word, for example, but without any meaning. And uh, and now, now when you have this crystallized art, now you have shu, because now you have a form.
Right.
You have the form to break a form. In Okinawan karate, there's only application, if you want to
Right.
put it that way. Now you have the form. Now you can break the form. Now you can transcend the form, and but that was that creates another kind of art of karate. It's another karate, right? So now the circle is closed. And that is in the Japanese philosophy, that is Shu-ha-ri, which was actually created many hundred centuries ago in the, believe it or not, tea ceremony. Uh, uh, and they simply, I don't know who, for the first time, they used these three kanji and created the concept. And then it was implicated as invented tradition into martial arts, not just into karate. It was brought into swordsmanship as well. But of course, we are karateka, so we look
Right.
at that. So, so that is how you kind of uh, that we can understand how Shuhari was created, and how it makes sense in this thought process, of course. And just one more thought, if
No,
I
sure. Go ahead.
may,
No, go ahead.
to to communicate this and this kind of concept, you need to have a specific education. Yeah, it's kind of philosophy, so a concept. You don't have to study philosophy, but you have to have educated people to discuss that kind of thing. Back to Okinawa. Okinawans didn't have formal education. So it's not it's not that they are stupid people. Please, no, they are street smart and so on. They are not educated. They were not educated. Even after World War II, uh, Tokyo was not uh, 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 did not promote to opening higher education. They kept it down to the basic education. So Okinawan sensei are not very versed in discussing philosophical and technical aspects of the art. They teach without telling you. They have philosophies, they have concepts, but they have a hard time to put that into words.
So it's interesting you say that because Kichiro Shimabuku, my sensei, um,
Yeah.
was educated at Tokyo University.
Okay.
Okay, so
That's the
he
difference.
studied business at Tokyo University. So that's number one. And you look at Zenpo Shimabukuro, he was sent to college in Pennsylvania for a while, right? So, but Kichiro Sensei, he once said to me, we were sitting outside the dojo, and he pointed to an apartment building he owned. He owns two apartment buildings next door to the dojo, big apartment buildings. And he said to one of my students, he said, "This is good business." And he pointed to the karate dojo and he said, "This is a bad business." He said, "But because I have the good business, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter for the karate. It doesn't matter if I have one student or 100 students because I have a good business." And I look at
Mhm.
myself in the same way. I was a police officer. Um, I married very well. My wife was a doctor. So I never relied on the dojo to pay my bills. All right. Um,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
now I'm in retired from the police department. I'm sitting in my dojo that's built on my property in Arizona. I don't care if I have one student or 100 students here because there's no overhead, right? Um, but interesting too, some things that Master Shimabuku said, like one of the things he said to me was, go out and make your own strong Ishinru. He said, don't do everything exactly the way I do. He said, study with other people, learn from them, take the things you think are good and use them. The things you don't like, don't use them. And
Mhm.
that was something that really, I think, if he hadn't told me that, I don't think I'd have, I don't know what the word, I don't think I've gotten as far in martial arts as I have, right? Because what he
Understand.
did was my first instructor was like, no, you can't train with anybody else. You can only train with me. And that was one of the reasons I had to eventually leave because I just couldn't take him. And not to mention he wasn't a very good person. But the point was here's the headmaster of the art telling me the complete opposite. Like, hey, Mike, if you like things I do, do them. But if there's a couple of things I do you don't like, well, you don't have to do those. And when I would initially start showing fighting applications and different things, some of the first generation student of my teacher's father would say, "Oh, that's not Ishinru, that's Calandra Ryu," right? But here's the
Mhm.
headmaster saying the complete opposite. No, no, that's Ishinru. Like he's showing really, really strong Ishinru. And again, I think because I think it's great that these early pioneers of martial arts spread it, but I think it's a huge mistake for people in my generation um, to think that that was it. What those guys brought back was it. And I watch them, and a lot of them are still stuck in the shoe phase. Like they're still doing the kata exactly the way they learned it back in 1950. Where when I went to Okinawa the first time, I did Seisan Kata, and the first question Shimabuku Kichido asked me was, "Why are you doing it like a white belt?" That's what he said to me.
Oh.
And I was crushed. I was crushed, Herman. I'm like, I was a second degree black belt. I was already a police officer. But then he showed me what he meant. And I was like, oh my God, wait a second. You mean
Mhm.
I can do the kata like this? And he
Mhm.
basically said, he said, Michael, that way's for beginners. You're not a beginner anymore. Now you have to start moving like this.
Mhm.
That was like, oh my God, right?
Mhm.
So again, I think I think it's really good to have a teacher that understands that. And and also with Kichido Shimabuku, I asked him one time about why aren't we really involved with some of the bigger Okinawan associations like the umbrella organizations? And his response was very interesting. He goes, um, I'm Ishinru. This is the headquarters for Ishinru. A Shorin Ryu and a Goju person is not going to tell me how to do Ishinru. And
Mhm.
Tatsuo is a very interesting guy. His father, because he refused to do the Pinan kata. We don't have those in Ishinru. He felt they were for school kids. He wasn't going to do them. When you look at the form he created, there's a ton of open hand techniques where we're always
Mhm.
hearing in Okinawan karate, well, the Okinawans close the fist. Um, so it's almost like with Tatsuo, he was almost like looking at an older way of doing karate and trying to bring that back a little bit into the art he created. Um, so I just found it fascinating the mindset of some of the first generation people that brought these arts back. Oh no, no, this is the
Mhm.
only way to do it. There is no other way.
Mhm.
This is the way my teacher showed me. It's this way or the highway, you know.
I love the metaphor Chibana uses. He says karate is like a pond, and you have to have fresh water flowing into the pond to keep it alive. And the fresh water into the pond is the individuality of the teachers. So the pond remained the same, but it's always fresh water flowing into it to keep it alive. Uh, Karate martial art is it's not static. It's a living a living thing. It develops, and we all, every single one of us, adds contributes to the way it's done. Now, as long as we are rooted in the same mindset and philosophy, that is all good, yeah, and and we march in the same direction, so to speak. When we change our values and mindsets and stress one aspect of the complexity, like personal development, that is all I'm looking for. And we go into the do or sports and competition, that's all I want to do. Then we are not, we came from the same root or the same trunk of a tree, but we are not the same branch anymore. And I personally, I stick to the trunk and to the roots. And as far as I know, I visit Okinawa and regularly as well. As far as I know, there are very, very few dojos. I wouldn't call it organizations, maybe a handful, maybe less, who actually preserve the traditional ways, are open to further development, but preserve what it was initially intended to be. Everything else is Japanese karate these days. It's all sports. It's all competition, as you say, and it became a big business. Now, I'm not in the position to criticize that. It is how it
It is what
is.
it
I
is,
just
right? I
don't
agree.
name it as it is,
Right.
right?
Well, it's interesting, right? I mean, I did a seminar one time, and a generation student of Tatsuo Sensei's came to my seminar, which I was kind of surprised at. And I was talking about that. I was studying the Chen style Taiji Chuan and Shihei Kwan, which is feeding crane kung fu, and especially my Taiji master Chen Jianghua. He's totally teachers and principle based. So in other words, he literally will say, if you see me do something that violates the principle, don't do that. It means I'm making a mistake. He said, always go back to the principle. And he has a list of rules or principles that he gives. And I looked at those and I said, huh, I started applying that to my karate, and I found it made my karate much stronger because now I'm not just relying on what someone told me, I'm relying on a universal principle that if it works, it's hard to dispute it because it's a universal principle. When like you have the shuhari principle, right? It's a universal principle. You can literally apply it to anything. And I'll give you an example. So my younger son was a professional baseball player. Okay. He
Okay.
spent 3 years in the minor leagues with the Atlanta Braves. Now he's the assistant coach at a college in Florida. Okay. When I remember as a kid, when he started practicing, initially the baseball would be placed on a tee and he'd work on just the concept of his swing. And then obviously he had to work against live pitching, right? So the shoe phase is that ball on a tee or underhand soft toss, they call it, which is very easy to hit. Then you start working with an overhand pitching, but still what they call practice pitching, right? Batting practice. The guy's throwing batting practice. He's not trying to strike you out. He's trying to actually throw it so you can hit it. But then
Mhm.
eventually, right? So that would be the ha phase, right? And then eventually there's the re phase. Okay, now you're in a game, and that guy on the
Mhm.
mound is trying to strike you out. And can now you hit that pitch? And it was interesting that as both my sons played high level baseball, my oldest son was the captain of his college baseball team. And I remember watching a guy who they thought was going to be this amazing player. And I watched him face live pitching and couldn't hit it. But when I watched him hit in batting practice, oh my God, he was Babe Ruth, right? But in live
Mhm.
pitching, he couldn't hit it. And, so you see, again, this is why I find the book fascinating and why it applies to so many different things, is it's in everything. So when it's a concept, I always use that as almost like a pressure test. Okay, so does this concept work in the study of karate? Does it work in the study of jujitsu? Does it work in other aspects of my life? And if it does,
Mhm.
it means it's a pressure tested concept,
Yeah.
which I think is important. That's why I think the book is important. I think it's a really important book that I think, especially if you're an instructor, you should read it. But if you're someone that's starting out in martial arts, I think you should read it because I think it can help you. If you take the book seriously, it can help you prevent the pitfall of thinking you know too much too soon in terms of martial
Appreciate
arts.
that. I couldn't have said it better. And it gives you a perspective. It opens your eyes where you go and how far you can go. And perhaps it contributes a little bit to remain humble as well, but never, because wherever you go, wherever you think, know that you go back into shoe and uh, that your advanced perspective changed the thing you did. And this never ending circle, which then becomes a
Yep.
spiral into competence, which never ends. Where we are at, Mike, others have to decide.
Right.
It's not, we cannot say I'm in the half phase, I'm in shoe phase. Others will do that for
Right.
us, and
Right.
uh, we simply keep on training, sir.
Right. So listen, I appreciate you coming on. It's a great book.
Absolutely.
I urge everyone to get it. I'm gonna look to get your other books. So I really appreciate that you sent it to me. You know, uh, I did write a review. I don't know if it went live yet. I'll have to check later today.
Uh,
But
Appreciate that.
I really enjoy you coming on. And if you decide to write another book, I'd be happy to have you on again. And
Let's talk about the earlier one
okay. All right.
first.
All right. So what I'll do is I'll make sure I get those a hold of those and read them, and then we'll have you on again and talk about those.
Uh, Looking forward to that very much.
All right.
Great discussion. Thank
So
you for that.
thanks for coming on. All right. Take care.
All righty. See ya.
Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Hermann Bayer. I mean, I really enjoyed talking to him. Very interesting individual, has a varied background. Um, Excellent book, Shorin Ryu. Highly recommend it. You can check out his other books. They're all available on Amazon. I'll have the link in the description. Um, so, again, like, share, subscribe. Please consider becoming a monthly member. All right. Appreciate every one of you, and I'll see you in the next podcast. Take care.